Medieval Paris had 26 public bathhouses. Modern Paris has 0, so why do you picture medieval people as filthy peasants who never washed? Almost everything you've been told about medieval hygiene is wrong. The filthy Middle Ages is a myth, and the people who invented it were lying about their own ancestors for very specific reasons. By the end of this video, you'll know how often medieval people actually bathed when Europeans really did stop washing, and why we still picture the wrong century as the dirty one. Let's start with the cities. By the 13th century, every major European city had public bathhouses. Paris had at least 26. London had its own bathing district called Stew Lane. Stew was the medieval word for a bathhouse. Frankfurt, Vienna, Florence, Rome, all the same. Thousands of bathhouses across Europe. Frankfurt, Vienna, Florence, Rome, all the same. Thousands of bathhouses across Europe. Many had attendants who'd scrub your back. Most served food and drink. Some had musicians. For a city dweller, going to the bathhouse 2 or 3 times a week was completely ordinary. Some guilds even subsidized it for their members. Some employers paid for their workers' baths as part of their wages. This isn't a few exceptions buried in old documents. The bathhouse was a normal feature of medieval urban life, like a coffee shop is to you now. But what about everyone outside the cities? That's where the myth gets even weirder. Most people in medieval Europe were peasants. They didn't have access to a fancy stew lane, so they must have been the filthy ones, right? Wrong. Medieval household manuals, actual books written in the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries, instruct readers to wash their face and hands every morning, to wash their feet before bed, to rinse their mouth after eating, to comb their hair daily. These weren't aspirational lifestyle guides. They were the medieval equivalent of common-sense parenting books. To rinse their mouth after eating, to comb their hair daily. These weren't aspirational lifestyle guides. They were the medieval equivalent of common-sense parenting books. Peasants bathed in rivers in summer and wooden tubs in winter, heating water on the same kitchen fire they cooked on. They had soap, actual hard soap. Castile soap from Spain has been around since at least the 12th century. They cleaned their teeth with cloths, twigs, salt and herbs. They mixed mouthwashes from vinegar and wine. Hand washing before meals wasn't optional. It was strict etiquette, partly because most medieval people ate with their hands. Forks didn't become common in Northern Europe until the 17th century. So if medieval Europeans were bathing in cities, washing in villages, making soap, brushing their teeth and treating hand washing as a moral duty, when did we get the dirty Europeans from? The answer is going to surprise you. The dirtiest period in European history wasn't the Middle Ages. It was the 17th and 18th centuries. In 1347, the Black Death arrived. Over the next 4 years, it killed somewhere between 30 and 50% of Europe. People were desperate to understand why. Doctors at the time, without germ theory, without microscopes, settled on a theory called miasma. Disease, they said, was carried by bad airs. And the way bad airs got into your body was through your skin, especially when your pores were open. And the thing that opened your pores was hot water. So bathing didn't just become unpopular, it became medically dangerous. Doctors actively prescribed against it. Get a bath, get the plague, that was the consensus. By the 1500s, bathhouses were closing across Europe. The Reformation accelerated it. Bathhouses were associated with prostitution, gambling and drinking, and Protestant authorities cracked down. By the 1600s, even royalty had stopped bathing regularly. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, ruler of Versailles, is recorded as taking only a handful of full baths in his entire life. His court compensated with perfume, powder, and frequent changes of underclothes. The whole stinky old Europe stereotype. It comes from this period, 2 and 3 centuries after the Middle Ages ended. So why does everyone blame medieval people for it? The filthy Middle Ages is a story invented by the people who came after. Renaissance scholars in the 14th and 15th centuries needed a villain to make their own age look enlightened. So they coined the term Dark Ages and projected every bad thing they could imagine onto the centuries before them. Ignorance, superstition, filth. It all got assigned to medieval people, regardless of what medieval people had actually done. Enlightenment writers in the 18th century inherited the framing and made it worse. By then, Europeans actually were filthier than their medieval ancestors. But instead of admitting that, they pointed backward and said, "Look how far we've come from those primitive peasants." Then came the Victorians, obsessed with hygiene, terrified of dirt, building the world's first sewer systems, and convinced that history was a story of moral progress out of darkness. They wrote the textbooks that taught your grandparents that medieval people never washed. Hollywood finished the job in the 20th century. Every medieval movie came with smudged faces, greasy hair and brown teeth. Visual shorthand for the past was gross. None of it was based on evidence, it just looked right. The truth is simpler. Medieval people bathed. Their grandkids in the 1600s did not. We blame the wrong century. If you found this interesting, you'll want to know how Roman toilets actually worked, including the shared sponge on a stick that everyone used, and the real reason the Black Death killed so many people, which has almost nothing to do with what your textbook said. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.